how did you decide to tackle this opportunity? What was the first signal that became impossible to ignore at Bloomreach or elsewhere?
But then what happens is you, as a product marketer, you do all this intense research. It's like you know these buyers as a friend, right? You know them inside and out. You know everything about them. But then by the time you create a campaign, it gets diluted. Think about the many, many stages, the committees that happen to take it from research all the way through down to an SDR sending an email or running an ad campaign or something around. It just, the voice of the customer really gets lost all along the way. Campaigns just die in committee, right? So I think the thing for me was, as obviously everything around AI came out, and the thing that AI is exceptionally good at is understanding qualitative data. So if you can take all that, think 500 interviews of qualitative data, and you can not just suggest that the marketing team or sales team uses it, but infuse it so that they cannot not use it in their go-to-market efforts. That's what we decided to build.
Este podcast está patrocinado por Ringover. Dirigir un equipo comercial puede ser un completo caos si no tienes las herramientas adecuadas. A todos nos gusta simplificar, y ahí es donde entra en juego Ringover. Para los que no lo conocéis, Ringover es un software de comunicación omnicanal con inteligencia artificial diseñado por y para equipos de ventas. Además de integrar todas las conversaciones en un único lugar, marca la diferencia con estadísticas en tiempo real, para ver cómo va la actividad del equipo al momento, y con Speech Analytics e IA, que resumen cada llamada, automatizan la entrada de datos en el CRM y hasta ofrecen consejos para que los comerciales mejoren tras cada conversación. Si nunca lo has probado, te lo recomiendo. Puedes hacerlo gratis en ringover.es y en el link que te encontrarás en la descripción.
Welcome to the pod. Today I'm talking to my friend Clint, co-founder of CharacterQuilt, a company that's quietly redefining how go-to-market is done. After 10 years at Bloomreach, where we met, he went from SDR to PMM leader, trusted across the organization. One word that I kept hearing from him was integrity and intelligence, which is really cool, and you don't hear from a lot of people. Clint saw firsthand what most marketing teams get wrong. They gather insights, but they don't operationalize them. And he's now flipping that model. So correct me if I'm wrong later, but I'm going to give this a stab. CharacterQuilt builds persona agents, AI representations of your actual buyer, fed by real voice of customer interviews. These agents help marketing and sales teams build micro campaigns around true pain points, faster, more relevant, and without necessarily guessing, like is sometimes done. So welcome to the pod, my friend. How are you doing?
Thank you. I appreciate it, Vaughn. That's a great intro. Yeah, you're doing great.
Thanks,
it's great intro. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always. All right, so we're gonna break this down into 3 segments: start, grow, and raise, to get some good stuff for the good people of Startup Writers. So, all right, from insight to idea, no? How did you decide to tackle this opportunity? What was the first signal that became impossible to ignore at Bloomreach or elsewhere?
Yeah, it's great. So I've been in the market research space and voice of the customer space for a long time. So I was a product marketing leader at Bloomreach, and at the time we were doing this massive win-loss program. We were doing probably 500 interviews a year, or at least several. It was getting close to 500 interviews every single year. But all of that information would just get put into a deck somewhere, get presented to the CEO somewhere, and we'd get a nice pat on the back. And it was a great program, and we fed product insights, we fed sales changes, we fed different plays and things like that. But eventually there were 2 big problems. One, it always got put into a deck, and we're like, there's something more here. There's something more. And then the next part was, okay, we're doing all this research, but then what happens is you, as a product marketer, you do all this intense research. It's like you know these buyers as a friend, right? You know them inside and out. You know everything about them. But then by the time you create a campaign, it gets diluted. Think about the many, many stages, the committees that happen to take it from research all the way through down to an SDR sending an email or running an ad campaign or something around. It just, the voice of the customer really gets lost all along the way. Campaigns just die in committee, right? So I think the thing for me was, as obviously, and then everything around AI came out, and the thing that AI is exceptionally good at is understanding qualitative data. So if you can take all that, think 500 interviews of qualitative data, and you cannot just suggest that the marketing team or sales team uses it, but infuse it so that they cannot not use it in their go-to-market efforts, that's what we decided to build. So yeah, we'll get into, maybe more of the story of how I met Byra, who's an AI certified genius with code running on a different planet. But that's the origin story.
Awesome. And if we take a step back, for people who are not familiar with the PMM role and people earlier stage in startups, first, why did you land in that role and ended up leading a team there? What attracted you to go there? Because you were an SDR, then you were an account executive. Why did you go in that direction first?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you've ever been an SDR or a salesperson, you know that you talk to customers every day and you feel how important those conversations are. And often there's this conflict between sales and marketing because they're like, look, I have all these great ideas, and marketing's like, whatever, it's just one salesperson, or I don't want to talk to you. But they are the best representation of the voice of the customer at your company, unless you are actually talking to the customer, right? The sales team, they are the next best source of market intel. So I think I got so excited from just getting on planes and going to events and talking to customers. I was like, there's so much power here. I want to be able to scale that voice of customer and that power. So I moved into product marketing very much as maybe that seems like not common for some people, but it was very natural for me to say, look, I love voice of the customer. I love talking to these customers. Let's just see if we can talk to hundreds of them and then build a marketing organization around that. So product marketing is, from my perspective, is very much just understanding your buyer. Sometimes product marketing is treated as, they do launches, they write content, which is true. It's a part of the job. The actual real job of a product marketer is just to understand the buyer and feed into everything else. There's someone that said it well, which is you bring the market into the company and then you take that information and you push it back out. I can't remember the exact phrase. Someone at Facebook said it was bring the market in, take it back out, something like that.
It's super interesting. And if you, from the lens of an early stage founder, at what stage do you start thinking about building out that function? To what extent does it overlap with the function of a product management or a product team that typically is in-house from day zero? No, not necessarily a PM, but a development team. How should a founder think about bringing in their first PMM hire?
I would say everyone at the company has to be talking to users all the time. This is something that Byra, my co-founder, has drilled into me. He's went through Y Combinator with his first startup, and it's all just about talk to users, build products. So I think he and I were very philosophically aligned there. So I would say for the very first part of the company, the founders are the product marketers. They're understanding the market and the buyers, and then they're writing code, or they're taking voice of the customer, which is what I do in my day job. I take the voice of the customer and we turn it into campaigns. So once you start to get beyond the point, once you build that, I'm writing the campaigns with our one marketer that's in-house right now. Once you get to the point where it's we need to understand a new market, or we need to understand it at a deeper level, and we need to start taking that voice of the customer and building campaigns out. At that point, you're either hiring a kind of a full stack marketer as a founder, or you're hiring a product marketer specifically. And it depends on the skill set of the founders, right? If you're look, I don't really know how to write messaging or copy or do any of these things. Obviously, there are tools out there that can help. But taking the voice of the customer and turning it into a campaign, we're not going to hire a product marketer for a very long time because I can do that job. But if you're look, we're very technical founders. We need someone that takes what we're learning from users and then can translate that into marketing materials and campaigns. Do that. But it's a little tricky because honestly, you need someone running campaigns probably first. So you're I would say at the beginning, take the founders, take the user knowledge, feed that to a full stack marketer that can run campaigns. But eventually, I don't know, maybe a hot take would be I think product marketing is a very, very important function, but I would wait until a little bit later, till you've got you're feeding users into campaigns, because AI can handle so much of this. And we'll get into a little bit about what we do on that front. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Got it. And did you test multiple ideas or go all in on this one from the get-go?
I think I think we did 2 or 3. We did one very significant one, and it's a long story, but you mentioned integrity. That's very important to me. We went through one idea that we thought would genuinely work, but that we didn't feel good about. Not illegal, we weren't doing drugs or anything, but it was, it felt just a little bit not the right way to do things. So we went through an idea for about 3 or 4 months. We were generating revenue, and we're look, this is just doesn't feel like something I would be proud of. So we shut down that idea. I guess we're on idea pretty much number 2 that has iterated and gone through different phases and things like that. But yeah, probably on idea 2 significantly.
Awesome. Before we get into market insight and the product itself, a few words on how did you choose your co-founder and how did you approach building the MVP?
Yeah, so I met Byra actually about 4 or 5 years ago, because back to voice of the customer, I was trying to analyze. I looked at Gong and I was I have 15,000 Gong calls in my database. Like, how do I use those better? Gong definitely has some tools for getting insights out of those, but I was like, we could do way more than the tools that Gong is offering. And so Byro's first startup was around that idea of like, how do we help marketers, in particular product marketers, get more insights out of Gong calls? So I was working with him on that, and then we'll maybe get into the story, but he closed that startup down in part when ChatGPT came out, and there were some things that looked like they would be more of a commodity. And I posted on LinkedIn, I said, I'm leaving Bloomreach. I've got 3 ideas around a startup. And he saw my post and said, hey, let's talk. From the very first call, we're like, all right, we're in business. And then how did we approach our MVP? It was very much, how you would expect. Like, we spoke to users. We needed to validate that the problem that I was facing at Bloomreach was actually a problem that was experienced by other people. I think, you have to look for your first 10 and 50, passionate users. And there were other people that were having these similar challenges. So that was the first step.
And when you say they were having similar challenges, how did you test their willingness to pay? Like, how did you get conviction that this is something people worth paying for, no?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I feel like after going through the experience, it's like it takes a village to start a startup, right? And I reached out to all of my friends, family, and former coworkers. And I would say mostly former coworkers that were like, I'd been at Bloomreach for 10 years. I'd met, 50 to 100 marketers and had seen different styles and things like that. I just reached out to all of them. So that was step number 1. And maybe that's a cheat code, or maybe it's a cheat code in a good way. But I just basically said, like, would you be, honestly, we have this idea. Would you be a design partner with us? And I didn't ask it in those words, but it's like, we have an early idea. Would you be willing to take a chance on testing something? And I think a lot of people were like, look, you have an AI expert. You have someone that's decent at market research. Maybe you guys are onto something there. And if you guys can find just a small use case that would be helpful to us, just start really small. We're willing to take a chance on you. And there's so many people out there right now that are like, I don't know what to do I'm a marketer and I don't know what to do with AI besides write copy and brainstorm things, right? There's so many other things that you can be doing, but it's really, honestly speaking, as a non-technical founder, it's very difficult to know, right? It's like, so every day, every week we sit down, me and Byro, and it's like, I have this marketing problem. Literally, I have this marketing problem for CharacterQuilt. How can you help me solve it? And he's like, well, don't think about it like a marketer. First of all, like, think about it as an engineer, not a go-to-market engineer. Full credit to Clay for coming up with that term, but like, a go-to-market, Byro is literally a go-to-market engineer who is an engineer, not a business person. So he approaches go-to-market from a very different perspective. And that's sort of the way we went about it. Was like, okay, now we have these 5 design partners. They'll just bring us a marketing problem. And then Byro and I will look at it mostly, Byro looking at it from an AI angle and saying, I'm looking at it being like, okay, you have the problems I had. Now Byro's going to look at this and say, like, how would we solve this? And lots of like translation happening there of like, how do you communicate how agents work and how operators work and how all these very technical concepts, how RAG models work, like communicate that to a marketer and figure it out. But that's what the design process was last year in 2024 of, figuring out that MVP.
Este podcast está patrocinado por Gong. Gong es una plataforma de inteligencia artificial optimizada para hispanohablantes y elegida por muchas compañías líderes. Si quieres aprender cómo cerrar más oportunidades, hacer proyecciones de ventas mucho más precisas y conseguir insights en tiempo real sobre tu mercado y tus competidores, vete a gong.io/demo para verlo en vivo.
And you mentioned you targeted something very specific that you can work with your design partners on. How did you decide what to work on, and was it like, what did that first sliver of product, what did it solve?
Yeah. A lot of people wanted to solve for the challenge that I had, which was I just need to build a target account list. And that might seem simple. It's like, we'll just pick a list of accounts, but it deeply matters which accounts you go after and which people you go after. And so they would come to us and they would say, we want to go after this type of company, but we've always relied on firmographics. It's always like employee size and revenue and industry. So always like, that's how we build lists. I don't know. It's what ZoomInfo has. It's what Apollo has. So we just use those things. And so we just started helping companies do that more efficiently. We started predicting pain points of companies by collecting all this different public data and research about an individual company. And we would say, if we have a qualitative understanding of the pain points and the priorities of these companies, then we can start to predict that. And then you'll have a better way of going to market, because all you'll do is say, I have this idea. Maybe I'm a salesperson. I just came from a conference. I've got this new idea of new place to go, this new play to run. but how am I going to find the companies? And so we would just take that information, we would enrich or do research on a couple of hundred of their target accounts, and then we would think about it as a column, and we'll show maybe a little bit of a demo later, but like let's show a column with actually pain point information, not just demographic information. And then of course you can run different campaigns and build target account lists from that. So that was definitely the initial pain point that we were trying to solve, was just help people like know which accounts to go after better.
This is super interesting, but maybe we need to take a step back for those who are not as familiar with the go-to-market tooling landscape. Let's put it that way, right? Like from the beginning of times, the emergence of the CRM, the emergence of sales optimization, sales enablement, marketing technologies of all sorts in which we've been playing around with a lot of. So where are we now? No? And what part of the stack are you embedding yourself in? Is it data enrichment from a different angle? Like, why is this ripe for disruption now? Can you set the stage of go-to-market tooling?
Yeah, so I'll try not to do the history lesson, but I will say that at the current state, if you're a founder, let's just say you're a founder right now. This podcast is often for founders, right? You're a founder that needs to do like 42 jobs really well, or, roughly speaking. Let's just talk about go-to-market where you have to do 14 jobs really well. You have to understand your buyer, like the person, not the persona, the Ivan, if I'm selling to you, right? I have to understand you. Then I have to understand the market and what that market looks like. I have to figure out the pain points and the trends and the themes that are happening in the market. That's a pretty difficult job. That's a product marketer's job, right? We talked about that. But then there is how do I actually build a campaign, communicate with the market? That's a marketing operations job. So that is where, how do I take a list from ZoomInfo or Apollo, and how do I build a list of accounts to go after? And as you say, you could put that in a CRM, you could put it in a marketing, let's talk about CRM first, but that's a tough job, right? To like figure out which companies to go after among the 40,000 companies or the 12,000 that are going to SaaStr or Dreamforce or something. It's a very difficult problem. So that's sort of your ICP. It's like product marketing and it's marketing operations. Then you would have to function as a campaign manager, which is like, I need to come up with the creative, let's call it the distribution, like who do I reach out to and what tactics should I use to reach them, right? So should I build a podcast? Should I do cold email? Should I run ads? Like there's all these distribution and tactics you need to run. And then of course you have the people that actually do the end work, which is like, you probably need to make some human connection. So you hire an SDR. Now, founders often just pick one of those, or they often are just like, well, let's hire an SDR to start reaching out to people. And so the problem is where we have gone is we've built marketing silos all through the thing. That's how I would build the history of marketing. Now you have tech that solves all those problems, but you have these silos where it's very difficult. So as a founder, you're like, well, do I hire 5 people? Do I hire 6 people to do this? Well, you can't, but there's very few tools out there that can take it from end to end. So like, where do we fit in the stack? Well, we're trying to help a founder do all of those things. Now, ideally, you would have one person that's not the founder. It's like a marketer or some sort of go-to-market person that is not dealing with fundraising and all the other stuff. So our ICP for us is like, at least a minimum bar is like, you should probably have at least one marketer, at least one person that can help out. But where we fit in is we try to do it. We remove the silos. We try to build this entire stack from end to end where you could build a campaign in 30 minutes instead of 3 weeks, right? That process, you've seen it, Yvonne, like at other big companies, that process to build a campaign, especially if it's a bigger one, is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and 20 people that are involved and all those things. So it's very difficult for a founder to do research, take the user interviews that they're so good at collecting, take that through to the marketing operations work, building a target account list, going through the whole process. It's very difficult. So we work with a lot of very small marketing teams. It's like 2 and 3 people, 1 and 2 people that are like, I need a tool that can help me do it all.
Makes total sense. And what does that actually look like in practice? No, like, could you show us a little demo and tell us more about what a persona agent is, which I'm very curious about.
Yeah, sure. So before, definitely will share my screen. I'll say my preamble here is the first thing that we start off with is research. The most important thing that you can do, and research, let's put in quotations, because we will often, if someone has not done a lot of buyer persona research, like not quite sure who they're selling to, that's probably unusual for a founder. They've done some sort of research. They're sharing their stories on the podcast. Like they have a story. They know the user, but you need to do a lot of it, right? So we will go recruit people from your target audience, not your customers, like your target prospects, and we'll interview them. It's just a very generic 30 to 45 minute interview where we're saying, what are your pain points? What are your problems? What does your buyer journey look like? What challenges do you have with your tech stack? Those kind of things. So we'll infuse a whole bunch of research at the beginning, but we can collect anything else. Put surveys in there. You put gong calls in there, like any other information that you use. You can build this concept of a persona agent or an AI persona or an avatar of your persona. That's the first step. But let me share my screen and we'll show you exactly what that looks like in practice. Okay. So, the first interface here that I'll show you is, or I'll just, let's see, one more window here. The very first interface is going to look like very much a table of accounts, because that's where everything starts. Is you need to get a list of accounts and you need to start working with that. So I'm actually going to show you our environment, which is what I use on a day-to-day basis to run our go-to-market. So it's going to show a list of accounts, which is, so this is a list of accounts, right? So this is all of our 1,800 accounts that we're looking at reaching out to right now. And as I mentioned, like the first thing you need to do is start doing research. And so we have in the background, in the knowledge base, we have this AI persona, this persona agent that is there. But now we need to figure out, okay, what are the types of campaigns and things like that? But in order to do that, you need to do deep research on every one of these accounts. And so you can see, look at the level of depth on every one of these companies. So you're using research agents, but it's not just a generic research agent. It's actually your persona. Imagine you have your persona, like the person you're reaching out to, your target, is actually doing the research for you. And it's saying, okay, here's the deepest pain points for Nebula graph. Like this is just one paragraph of like a 50-page document that we're doing research on. Now, I would say like deep account research is not going to be something like just proprietary to CharacterQuilt. Like a lot of companies are doing deep research on those things. So like showing you this is just a little bit of the backstory of like, okay, we need to get this deep understanding of their pain points, the personas, the high level summary of the company, like all this information and pulling it in. And then you're doing a very simple lookup, which is, okay, you upload your documents, your product documents, everything that you do at your company, and let's go see if you're a fit for any of these companies. Like it's a very quick ICP, ideal customer profile analysis that says this nebulagraph.io is only a fit of 5 for CharacterQuilt, so we probably shouldn't go after them. But this company, Extensive, seems like we're very confident that this is an 8 or above, and here's the process, the justification for why they're a good fit. So anyways, like the next step is like you can add all sorts of, the next step is like, okay, well, I know that's great. You have information on our personas, you have information on our accounts, but then what you do is you want to go look for campaigns. And so this is a little prompt library here that we built all sorts of different prompts in here, but the one that I'll click on is like, hey, help me generate campaigns. I want to generate, like, based on all of the understanding of my customers and everything you know about my product, like just help me come up with campaigns. And what the campaign prompt will do is it says like, okay, you're a B2B marketing strategist, like refer to all of this information in this table and maybe even attach some market research interviews that we've conducted. Basically, like if you're familiar with a company called Glean, like they've sort of popularized this idea of just like pulling everything from your company into a single place. And we've got like all this data that's available up here. And so this is going to go through and it's going to start building campaigns. It's already starting to load here with a bunch of different ideas. So, sort of ChatGPT interface, but it's showing you different campaigns that you can run, but also new ICP criteria that you could build in. And so this is something like, okay, you might consider adding like a frequency and buyer interaction signals. And why is it useful for this campaign? So we're going from like identifying the campaign, and then we could even go add some additional criteria into this. So we're like, okay, if we think that recent funding is an important thing, so I could come in here and say, recent funding, and say, find recent funding events, right? So you can come in here and say, let's add this column to the thing, and it will immediately, I already created that column, but so you can see all these different columns that I've created. Let's just add them all in here, like 30 different types of columns. And I can come in here and just say, okay, let's go enrich these columns. So let's pop this out and say, let's enrich these. So this will go, this is going to go start doing research on all of these companies using that research agent, begin using the persona agent that's there. Okay, so last thing is like, you've built a campaign, but then you need to actually reach out to these people and figure out which companies to go after. So then you can filter on the companies, or you can just say, which companies are a good fit for this campaign, and it will give you a list and let you filter by those things. So then I can come in here and say, cool, let's just imagine it told me these 5 companies were a good fit. Then we need to go find the people, right? We need to find not just which titles are important, but like, do they fit my persona? And then we can start running campaigns. We can start doing deep research even on the person or not. Like I was running a thing about, are they remote or not? Like we were running an event, like a dinner last week, and it was like, let's find all the people in our database that are actually working remotely and start enriching that. So anyways, it takes you all the way through to building assets for these campaigns. I'll stop my sharing right here. But like, you've gone through the process of again, from beginning to end. Think about, you only get one marketer to hire in your entire startup, right? Like, who would you hire? Well, we think it's going to be just a full stack marketer that can go from research to marketing operations to campaign creation to potentially, and the SDR is a tricky one. I'm a personal fan of like, you need a human touch somewhere involved in there to make a human connection and not just blasting out 10,000 emails a week. But you need to be able to do all of these functions. So AI has just enabled us to be what we call a 10x marketer. There's 10x engineers out there, thanks to Cursor and other tools. We're building the 10x marketer, and I won't claim credit for starting that phrase, but we're definitely on that mission along with others to build that.
Can you tell me more about the actual creation of the persona agent itself? You mentioned you go out and perform interviews. Like how burdensome is it for you guys? How does that scale now as you become bigger and get higher expectations? Like how do you get those at scale?
Everyone wants to talk about scale, but some things there are no shortcuts for, is how I put it. Like there are no shortcuts for, you need to go do interviews with your target buyers and you need to get that data. Now you can shortcut it in some ways. Like if you have 400 gong calls that you've done with customers, yeah, let's use that data for sure. Let's build that. And imagine it's just a big folder. Like let's throw all of our gong calls in there. Let's throw a bunch of surveys that we've done. But as a startup, you probably haven't done surveys. So let's just throw all the Fathom calls that we're doing in there. And then let's throw let's go do 10 interviews that are completely unbiased. Gong calls are a little bit biased, which is the challenge, right? You're selling them something. They're already interested in you. So asking them, who they are and why they care about you is a little biased already. So you want to have some other inputs, but then you take that into a representation of your buyer. You use AI to like think about it as just a typical persona, but you're throwing tons and tons of inputs into it. And it's not just a persona that lives on a slide. Think about like an API. It's a persona API in a sense that you can always call that persona. You can always imagine you sold a customer, and imagine if they could always sit in the room with you as an ideal prospect, and you're just constantly all day asking them stuff like, hey, I'm not an expert in your business. Like, tell me stuff. And it's not about the insights, but it's about like having that person help you pick a target account list and things like that.
And from the perspective of a founder who's choosing their basic go-to-market tech stack, let's say they have their first marketer and they're looking at the bunch of tools, data enrichment, they're looking at Clay, they're looking at you guys, they're looking at marketing automation platforms. Like, how should they sort through this decision at the beginning? Like what do they prioritize, and how does the Clays and other emerging tooling fit with you, no?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, like which companies, how do you think about research and enrichment and outreach? And like, there's 10 tools that you'd get suggested to go build. And that's, I think, part of the problem is like, well, in theory, you should have like a GLG or a Winter, like a research, something to do research with at the very beginning. You should have a Clay that can enrich your accounts with something more than just firmographic information. You need Zoom Info for like basic contact database, or maybe you can just rely on Clay. You need a CRM. I think that all of these tools, and then you need tools to do outreach. You need SalesLoft, you need outreach. You probably need HubSpot for like a CRM plus marketing. Like, there's so many tools to do all these things. That's part of the problem, is that like there are so many tools. You sort of need to be an expert in each one of these things. Like, it takes quite a bit of work to get Clay up and running and have a go-to-market engineer managing those things. Like, we're trying to just dramatically simplify it all. We have customers that come to us and they don't buy any of that stuff. They just say like, can we buy CharacterQuilt? And you are our all-in-ones like startup package for building a go-to-market motion. And we're not there yet. Like, we have not solved for, we don't want to actually, let's say we are there for being able to replace all those tools. We don't want to replace certain tools like, Smart Lead, for example, or Instantly. These guys that have figured out like email warming and domain warm up and all those kind of things. They've just got that down. We use like some of those tools that we don't want to reinvent. But like for all those things in the beginning to do research and to pull all this data in, like even Glean, if you're familiar, I think I mentioned Glean, like how do we pull in all this incredible data that we've collected over a year of doing discovery? I mean, put yourself in those shoes. Like, you've done probably 100 discovery interviews with all these different people. Like, where are those sitting? Like, they're in some database somewhere. Like, are you using those today? Probably not. but they represent your customer. So think about it as like Glean plus GLG Winter plus Clay plus Zoom Info plus Outreach plus something to run your campaigns, right? Like it's quite a big stack. So we are trying to make it simpler.
And so would you say the atomic unit of what you're building is basically the voice of the customer, and that there's a market opportunity because of transformer technology that allows you to build this from the ground up, no, and compete with those who stop, no? So Gong stops at capturing the interview, transcribing it, coaching, sales reps, etc. You can build on top of that. And there's other people that are building data enrichment layers for the go-to-market sales organization specifically. And then you're saying, okay, there's a gap here for the marketing engineer, no? Like, is that the insight? Like, is that where you're going?
Yeah, I would say that we are building essentially a go-to-market or a campaign operating system that can rely on voice of the customer data that is very rich inside the tool. So I think you said it well. The atomic unit is the research and the trends and the buyer, like putting them at the center. That's why I come back to ethics. Like we didn't go with that other idea, but I love this idea because it feels right? It's like, yeah, of course I want to start with the buyer, but who's actually doing that well? Like, do you really feel like if you look in the mirror, like I'm doing this amazing, that I'm just like representing my customer at every stage? Like usually it's like I've done 200 calls and I'm trying to translate that, but then I hire someone and they haven't been in those 100 discovery calls. So then what? Like they're not, the translation of go-to-market and like translating from a founder to the rest of your team is extremely difficult. I think it's an underrated conversation of like, how do you play the game of telephone? How do you, if you've done all the research as a founder, how do you translate that to your SDR? Like, this is a very difficult question. Like, how do you put that knowledge in their heads? But if that SDR, let's just say you only have one SDR at the company, but she's pretty smart, right? She's like, I could come up with campaigns, I could run campaigns, I could do all those things. What if you gave that SDR the atomic unit of tons of this go-to-market information and the tooling and the workflow to say, and I can come up with a target account list as a MOPS person, and I can reach out to the right people, and I have all this information. What if you can empower that BDR, SDR to run those campaigns quickly and not have to rely on, all these other things or hire somebody? Like, you're duplicating yourself as a founder, and by that I mean you're duplicating the voice of the customer, which feels right. It feels like it's the right way to do go-to-market and sales, which is what we're excited about.
I remember at Bloomreach, our CRO at the time used to say that our CEO was the best sales guy that we had, no? And this is part of your insight goes from there, no? How do you get a Raj in every room and ensure that that's there, no? That's super interesting. Another question related to this, and it's a very difficult question because it's ambiguous and there's startups for everything, different business models, different ICPs, but just put yourself in the shoes of someone who's got a seed stage startup and who's thinking of building a go-to-market organization, and there's all these tools and they're going to hire 2 or 3 people. Who do you give the responsibility of building out the tech stack and for what? No? First hire, but then also who does the responsibility of managing this increasingly complicated or bigger tech stack? And for good reason, because you're starting to have, if this agent thesis realizes, you're going to have like workers or AI plus human plus the machine, as we used to say, and someone needs to own the tech stack on top of the team. So who owns what?
I think where we are today is not where companies are going. So let me split it into 2 pieces. I would say today, well, let's start with the future. Let's say in the future, you hire a go-to-market person. I don't know what that title is going to be, but I would call it a full stack marketer if we had to use a term right now. It's just like someone, probably not a fresh out of school junior SDR. I would say someone that's done a little bit of SDR work, probably done some marketing, probably run some campaigns, maybe at least felt the pain of some of these marketing tech stacks. In the future, I would say you give them CharacterQuilt. Obviously, I'm going to pitch myself, right? I would say you give them a tool that allows them to do all of the jobs at once. Now, today you might say, go hire a somewhat junior, like a mid-level marketer, but still hungry kind of person that maybe has ideally some sales experience, and then can use all the tools that we've talked about: Zoom Info, Clay, GLG, Winter, Glean. Like, yeah, sure, give them all those tools. If you've never heard of CharacterQuilt, that's probably what you're going to do. Go do that. But I would say, like, in the future, you're basically just hiring a single person, a single full stack go-to-market person that has probably sales and is doing a little bit of sales and marketing and SDR, or at least marketing plus SDR, and handing that off to a salesperson. So yeah, I would say that's the future. Now today, in order to translate, I don't know, that's why we're building it. It's like today it's difficult. It's just like, I don't know what you do today. Today you kind of hodgepodge it. You try to pull together 100 gong calls. You try to train people on what your customer really wants. You try to maybe throw the gong calls into a GPT and try to build like the voice of the customer. You kind of hack your way into that. And there's sort of this loss of translation. So I just think there's pain out there today with like how it currently works. And we're all sort of like struggling through it.
I like the idea of a full stack marketer. I'm gonna keep that in mind. Awesome. So final part, raising. And I'm also curious, and this may be silly, but did you actually use CharacterQuilt to think through fundraising or enrich your target account list of VCs, which in a way are a way of doing an enterprise sale, no, with long sales cycles, depending on the stage you're in?
It's a good question. We had someone reach out to us the other day with a similar question, which was like, I can't even remember what the use case was, but it was like, could I use it was like job search. It was job search. It was a consultant that I was talking to. He was like, I would love to get more gigs or something like that. And maybe it's that sort of salesy, but like, he's trying to think about target account lists and prioritizing those target account lists and things like that. And so he's like, yeah, could I use this to put people in there almost as a CRM? There are some people that are starting to talk about using these data enrichment providers or a Clay or a CharacterQuilt as your CRM. Like, do we really, do we need a CRM? I don't know. I'm not going to go there because we're not there yet, clearly, but let's put that seed in people's brains. Like, what's the future of CRM? But, yeah, I think, did we use it? No, because we hadn't built the product yet. The product wasn't ready to use on ourselves, but we're using it for everything now. So think about you're getting ready for an event and you've got a list of 1,000 accounts that you're trying to reach out to. You need to enrich those. You need to figure that out. You need to know which companies to go after. People are using that to get ready for an upcoming conference. Am I using it? My current favorite use case is I think I'm probably 500 people over the last 18 months of this startup that I've spoken to. They're in all sorts of different places of stages and things like that. So now I'm uploading those into our CRM, which is CharacterQuilt, and just say like, enrich those or help me understand, how did I meet this person? Like, what conversations did I have? We've all been there. Like, we have 7,000 connections on LinkedIn and no idea how we met any of them. And like, so who do I reach out to for help? Like, your network is probably bigger than you think. And the thing that I woke up the other night thinking about was like, we talk about brand awareness of your startup, right? Like, your brand awareness is any person ever that has come into contact with your company. And I know that seems a little CRM-y, but like every person, there were like 5 users. We had one customer and they laid off like 90% of their company. But there was 5 users that I was thinking about the other day. It's like, I haven't talked to them in 6 months. They know CharacterQuilt. They know our brand. They had a good experience with us. And so why am I not reaching out or having them in my database and like having those conversations? So anyways, you can use it for all sorts of things.
Cool. I was gonna go into like, how did you raise pre-seed and seed, but I'm gonna cut it short because I think we got all we need. Congratulations on the work starting now, and the product looks amazing. Where can people find you if they want to test out the product? What do they do? Sure.
Yeah. CharacterQuilt.com. So my co-founder said, I want a name that people don't have to spell and that they can spell it right off the bat. So CharacterQuilt, you can see sort of like our branding in the top. So that'll little visual reminder for you. I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So we do a lot of research, as you can probably tell from this. And I post learnings from that all the time on LinkedIn. And so you'll find me or get annoyed with me at some point with all the research we're publishing and stuff. But yeah, I mean, reach out if you want to see anything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clint.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ivan.